Race fans, my name is Taylor and welcome to Above the Yellow Line, the show where we talk about all the updates, theories, news, recaps, and more of the NASCAR Cup Series. As you can see, you can actually see me today, so welcome to the show, welcome to the setup. I had so much fun putting this together for you all. I'm hoping to do more video presentations for you all as time goes on. I'm going to try it out a little bit. I'm also hoping to move this channel over to like an Apple podcast station just for more accessibility for viewers, so stay tuned for that announcement. But for now, I'm appreciating the vintage setup I have here. It's going to stay this way, but it's kind of ironic because we went to Darlington this weekend for the Throwback Paint Schemes weekend, also the Goodyear 400, so a lot of fun stuff happening this weekend. There was so much looking back to the past, a beautiful day, beautiful photos, a lot of great memories for the fans. Hearing the fans in the stands was amazing to hear. The commentators got in on all the fun dressing up. It was a great day. Unfortunately, I have some confusion with this race, but we'll get into that in a little bit. For now, let's line up your field with the starting lineup, an updated version, and then we'll go into the final results. Let's begin by looking at a starting lineup of the field, an updated one with Elliott and Almirola moving to the rear. The same issue that happened with Larson's car a week ago at Talladega happened to Elliott Sunday with the team realizing they had left a packer on the car, so they had to remove it. It was marked as an unapproved adjustment, so I'm pretty sure this is what happened to Larson, and if it was, man, but other than that, those are the only changes. Everything else stayed the same with Keselowski starting on the pole. Now let's look at your finishing results. Up on your screen is the end results of this race. Martin Truex Jr. was your winner at the Goodyear 400. He dominated the day, leading 248 of the 293 laps, and the only ones to come anywhere close to that was Harvick and Chastain, leading 10 laps each. That just goes to show how dominant Martin Truex Jr. was today, how good his car was. More groundbreaking facts here about this win. Truex swept the stages, meaning he is the first driver in history of Darlington to win a stage and win the race at Darlington. He won stage 2 with like a 14-second margin. Jacobs Racing also has 8 different wins at this track with 6 different drivers. 3 out of the 4 current drivers have won at Darlington, and the company has won 6 out of the last 10 races here. So it really was a Jacobs Racing day. So that was your finishing order. I'm going to talk about the top 10 and beyond here for a little bit. Second place was Kyle Larson. Now, he got so close to the lead today. It was a back and forth battle between him trying to catch up to Martin Truex Jr. and not just getting close enough. He got super close with 10 to go, but he had to weave himself in and out of lap traffic, literally had to thread the needle between Reddick and Newman, and that kind of killed his momentum. Chase Briscoe, he got into it with Chase Briscoe, killed his momentum, and he just didn't have enough for the 19 car of Martin Truex Jr. Third place was Kyle Busch. Now, he finished the race where he started. I didn't think that was going to happen after on lap 22. He spun out after a tire corded on him, but he managed to come back and finish this race really well. Now, unfortunately, at that point, he was exactly 1 lap away from hitting the mark of 18,000 laps led in his career. He left that off into next race on lap 17,999. That sucks that you were so close to that milestone, especially at Darlington where you look back at history. Really sucked for that team, but he had a really good finish. I think NASCAR really didn't acknowledge that on social media. I'll post this right here for you guys. After the race, Kyle Busch had a bone to pick with whoever ran the NASCAR social media account, saying his beginning was better than the end of his race. Just a thought that this was important to share because yes, there is so much focus on the winner here, and yes, Martin Truex Jr. dominated the day, no question, but man, this statement was so false. Kyle Busch, like I said, finished this race where he started, and that was super, super impressive. So not accurate to say that the beginning of his day was better than the end of this race. I mean, I agree with Kyle Busch here. The taglines, they got to work on that on the media side for the NASCAR social media page. Fourth place finisher was William Byron with his 10th consecutive top 10 this season. The post-race broadcast finally brought it up, so I don't have to keep kind of griping on it, but my goodness, so impressive from this driver. Like I keep saying, his 3rd full year in the Cup Series. We're going to talk more about Byron's impressive run when we talk about the playoff standings in a week or two with Zachary Bell. But I wanted to bring this up again because my goodness, like I said, impressive. I also have to say his paint scheme this weekend had to be my favorite with a Neil Bonnet throwback. I have to get the die cast. I'm not going to lie to you guys. My wallet is going to be empty by the end of this week. We're going to go down the list here to 7th place finisher Chase Elliott, who had made his way from the back all the way to the front after he had to start to the rear, like I mentioned earlier. Considering the past few weeks have been a little bumpy for the 9 team, I think he had a really considerably good finish to the race. We have to see if that continues for the championship driver. Behind Chase Elliott was Ryan Blaney finishing in 8th, and finally Ryan Blaney gets a top 10 at Darlington. This was by far, I think, his worst track. He's never finished better than 11th at the track, which I found interesting because this weekend his teammates really struggled and they seem to be really good at the track. So congrats to Ryan Blaney for finally breaking through the top 10 at Darlington. Finally, to round out the top 10, I want to mention the Roush Fenway Racing team. Chris Buescher and Ryan Newman finished this race 9th and 10th. Actually, Chris Buescher was the last car on the lead lap to finish this race. Only 9 cars finished on the lead lap, but a great day for both of them that stayed consistently in those spots pretty much the entirety of the day. So a very good day for that team. Now we're going to take a look outside the top 10. Chase Briscoe finishing in 11th. This is his second best finish of the season. That Stewart-Haas Racing team needs some good finishes, so a good day for Chase Briscoe. Tyler Reddick, who we all expected to do really well today, finished this race in 12th. We all expect him to run really well at these tracks where you can really run the high line, getting those Darlington Racing stripes. He actually did testing with the next-gen car at this track a few weeks, or I guess a month ago at some point. But he finished this race in 12th. He actually ran in the top 10 to top 5 all day long, just couldn't finish it out. But still, I would say considerably a well day for Reddick. I want to briefly talk about a few drivers who did not finish the race today. Unfortunately, teammates having a similar issue in an almost identical crash today in the early stages of this race. I want to briefly talk about some of these drivers that did not finish this race today. We're going to start with Kurt Busch, who literally had his car go up in flames today. This absolutely sucks. I want him to do so well, so bad. This is, I think, the second time this has happened, maybe the third this season alone. So something to work on over maybe on the mechanical side. Maybe it was just how the crash happened. I don't know. That team just needs a lot better luck. Finally, I want to talk about Stewart-Haas teammates Eric Almirola and Cole Custer, ending this race in similar fashion. Eric Almirola only raced 5 laps until his car spun out into the safer barrier. Unfortunate for him, it was a really cool Mark Martin throwback paint scheme that just got totaled. And unfortunately for that team too, this is 8 out of the 12 races this year that he's finished 20th or worse. This is also a contract year. I hate to remind everyone about this, but this is Eric Almirola's contract year. So something to look out for there. And then almost deja vu, Cole Custer around laps 97 to 99 got into it with Anthony Alfredo and unfortunately just plowed his Mother's Day tribute paint scheme into the safer barrier, ending his day. And then finally, to round out these finishing positions, I want to talk about my race picks. And boy, they did not do as well as I hoped today. Let's start by talking about Brad Keselowski. A shocking non-factor today. Started on the pole and just slid backwards the whole entire day. Now, I had to keep in mind that he did not have his crew chief for reasons. Brad's crew chief was engineer Grant Hutchins, who filled in for Jeremy Bullins today for reasons that are kind of unclear. It was team protocols, but we don't know if that was COVID. Really not sure why his crew chief was not there, but nevertheless, I think it really affected his race today. So right off the bat with a crew chief change, things weren't good for Brad Keselowski's team, and then really early on in the race as he fell backwards, he told his team that his car was on the splitter, which means that there's no really pressure putting on the tires, which makes the car really loose and squirrely, so he was fighting a very loose car all day long and his team literally could not fix it. Like, they maybe tried, but it just did not work out. So not a good day for Brad Keselowski. My race pick definitely lost a lot of fantasy league points. So Brad Keselowski finished this race 24th, actually 3 laps down. A reminder that only 9 cars finished on the lead lap of this race. But besides the point, let's move over to the driver of the 21 car, Matt Benedetto. Matt Benedetto did better than Brad Keselowski, finishing this race in 19th, but this ends his streak, unfortunately, of finishing better and better each and every weekend. Literally the whole season, he's finished a spot better or a few spots better than he had previously, but at some point, streaks have to die. I just hate to see that for Matt Benedetto. This was a really rough weekend for the Ford camp, I think mostly just Penske as a whole, so hopefully things get better as we go to the Monster Mile next weekend, but I don't know. It was just a really rough day for Matt Benedetto. With the finishing results in place, now let's look at the points standings. Above the cutoff line right now are Chris Buescher, 19 to the good, and Tyler Reddick, who ties Matt Benedetto, who is marked below the line at 0. So they're going to have to fight for position here in these next few weeks as the points play out. And then Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is behind by 19 points. That is how the drivers finished this race. Now we have to talk about some key race takeaways with down the line. This race doesn't really have a lot to unpack, and I don't really mean that in a good or bad way. It was pretty generic, I would say, but there are a few things to talk about when we talk about the winner this weekend and we talk about how the driving actually was. So we're going to start with moment number 1 called, Do We Have a Winner? I keep saying this, but I really don't want to get into a playoff points conversation yet until I get to my mid-season, regular season review of the playoff standings. But it's hard to ignore talking about Martin Truex Jr., who has won 3 races this season. Of course, if you look at the winners list, he's the only driver to have won multiple races this season, and really no one has shown as much consistency, unless you're talking about Denny Hamlin or maybe Kyle Larson, in strength-wise. But Martin Truex Jr., really quiet this year. He's a very quiet championship pick, I would say. So all this begs the question, is Martin Truex Jr. the favorite to win the championship this year? And here are my thoughts. Things change really fast. We see the points kind of really shake up. I mean, Chase Elliott has moved down week after week. So every week we have a race, things are guaranteed to shake up. Now, obviously, Denny Hamlin is still at the top of the charts point rise, and I don't see that changing unless he royally screws up maybe 2 races in a row. But I think if we're looking at wins and we're looking at consistency, those two things combined, I think Martin Truex Jr. is actually a really good pick for this year's championship. And beginning of the season, I was like, Harvick, all the way. Harvick's going to be the championship favorite. Denny Hamlin. I think Denny Hamlin is playing the long game a little bit here because maybe it's not totally focused on winning a race. And yes, he would love to win a race, but at least he has that top 5 consistency in points that's going to get him very far. Of course, as I keep saying, of course, points reset once we get to the playoffs. But still, I think Martin Truex Jr. he's doing really well this season. There is no denying his talent. There is no denying his dominance when it comes to these races. When he has a good car, he shows it. And he can close out a race unlike a lot of the other drivers. He can start a race really well, finish a race really, really well. And that's something that a lot of the cars in this series don't have padded down yet. To kind of close out my argument, I actually want to look at some statistics here for Martin Truex Jr. putting on your screen right now. So these are numbers for Martin Truex Jr.'s season so far. He has been pretty consistent with a few snags here and there, but those actually, I think, involve wrecks, and it's not a lack of running well. For instance, the dirt race, Talladega and Daytona, he was involved in wrecks, and I believe the Daytona road course, he was involved in something too. I think he just had a penalty, he missed the chicane or something, but I'm not going to count that against him. But outside those 4 races, he has finished inside the top 10 each time and has 5 top 5s. I think consistency-wise, he is on par with Denny Hamlin and William Byron. I forgot to mention William Byron as a maybe potential championship pick, but we'll talk about that later. But Martin Truex Jr. does have a magnitude of wins to prove his consistency unlike these other drivers. He has not had a truly bad day, or he's never truly been off the pace, and so far seems to be quiet but deadly this season. So statistically, is he the favorite? Absolutely. He has some competition in the background, as I mentioned. William Byron, Denny Hamlin, Kyle Larson, I think, are your big 3 this season, and I feel crazy saying William Byron, but I keep mentioning him. His numbers really line up his success to a championship caliber team this season. So yes, he has some competition, but I think Martin Truex Jr., as of right now, things can change, but is your favorite to win the championship this year. I said not a lot to unpack this race, so this is the second and final moment number 2, called What Do You Want? And this has to do with the racing package because, again, fans are divided. We had the 550 horsepower package that fans just despise and don't like, and we ran a 750 horsepower package this weekend, which I actually thought was pretty good, but it really left fans questioning, was this actually a good race? Because it was pretty tame. There was not a lot of cautions. There was no cautions in the final stage. There was only 2 or 3 for instances today. So it was a good change of pace. I'm going to talk about kind of my thoughts on the whole race in a few moments, but really, really tame, and I don't necessarily think, for me, that's a good thing. I will say to start, I think a lot of fans really only like this package because they really do not like the 550 horsepower. I'm not speaking for everyone, but I think that's a big reason why a lot of fans were really privy to this package today. I also want to say a lot of drivers really liked racing this. I'll have a quote here by Denny Hamlin. Basically, Denny Hamlin said that the fans won't like this race because Martin Truex Jr. dominated the whole day, which, yes, sometimes dominant drivers can make a race really boring. People don't like it, which I will address in a second. So the drivers really enjoyed racing this track, and the puzzling piece for me comes in as a fan. And this again poses the question that I've been mentioning in these past few podcasts: what kind of racing do fans actually want? And there's a big divide right now between the old school fans, because I think a lot of old school fans really like this racing. It wasn't chaotic, it wasn't crazy, it was just straight up racing. And then there's a lot of newer fans that are like, I want close quarters racing, I want chaos, I want manufactured things. And then there's a middle gray area that we have yet to find. And I will say I'm a little bit more towards, not the chaos, but a little bit more towards the fact that I want more close quarters racing. I want drivers to race each other and not the track, because for a 3-hour race, I think that's a little bit extensive. And I will say Matt Weaver, I'll show you this here, actually had a really good question he posted to the fan base. He worded it very well and very accurately. It seems like a lot of fans now only enjoy the chaos, and even then, chaos can be really annoying if we look back at other races with so many cautions that we just all got frustrated as a fan base. I want to bring up a response from Eric Estep that he posed a question that if NASCAR ran more like F1, which I think is a very interesting response. And he said maybe we could have shorter races, which I actually think would bring about more intense racing as the drivers are going for every single point, every single position possible. Eric goes on to mention other options for NASCAR to pursue with more stage cautions, which is what I understood from his response. There are fans that enjoy 2 to 3 hour racing, but honestly, in my opinion, that's just not the fan base anymore as we're getting more younger fans, myself included, I would say. I hate to say it too, but I can lose interest pretty quickly, but I think it's kind of like a commentator sport. You're not going to be interested the whole entire time. But then I guess the same goes for sports like football or soccer even, or only the difference there is players have more control over their actions. In NASCAR, we are more at the whim of these cars and at what they are capable of aerodynamic-wise and speed-wise. There is a delicate balance that cannot be ignored, and I think that after the past few races, this topic is making its way through the NASCAR community and making its way like higher up. Don't know how they're going to address it now. We can't do a lot right now because we have the next gen cars to worry about. We don't even know how they're going to race, what racing we're going to expect to see, and what's going to be interesting to us as fans. So my thoughts on this are iffy. I want to say first, I really did appreciate the racing I saw today. I appreciated how hard I saw these drivers go. I liked seeing these cars on the brink of spinning out. I appreciated the lack of just really silly cautions that we've seen these past few weekends. I really appreciate these drivers really working hard to handle their cars. But I also really struggled to stay invested in this race, and it's not because Martin Truex Jr. won this race, not because he led the majority of the time. It's because, for me, I like close quarters racing. I like racing where you're racing the drivers and not the track. And I missed a lot of that today with Kyle Larson. He got super close and then got into lap traffic. That was the most excitement I think I saw today in this race, and even then I wasn't totally on the edge of my seat. So to finish out this segment, really, the fans have 2 options right now until we know what the next gen car is capable of. It's, do you want a lap gap between the winner of this race and the rest of the field, or do you want kind of close quarters racing where cars can't pass? Those are pretty much the 2 options with this package, so I'm hoping the next gen car really clears things up and makes this racing a lot more entertaining and maybe just less frustrating to watch at times. Now that you know my opinions on this race, I guess it's time to rate this race above or below the yellow line. And at this point, I want to go through and read what you all had to say about this race, because this one in particular, I'm confused about myself and I needed some help on this one. I'm going to read off a few here. Zachary Bell, one of my favorite co-hosts here, said, "It was a great race in the mid-pack. Truex dominated, but everything outside him was pretty interesting in my opinion." Dom Joseph wrote, "Good race, best car won, and that's the most important. Low downforce, high horsepower package works at Too Tough to Tame. Congrats to my boss. I look forward to celebratory donuts tomorrow morning." Then we have at NASCAR Jacked saying, "Same on struggle to gather the thoughts. Martin Truex Jr. dominated all day. Larson almost catches him. Not much excitement in between. Sure would have been poetic had he done so though." We have some other opinions here from Jeffrey. He said, "This Martin Truex Jr. fan is happy to see him close out this dominant performance and with a win finally." And then Kevin said this was boring, and William said this was a snoozer. Thank you all so much for the comments. I'm in the middle of these comments here. There was a lot more positive than there was negative. I actually had to go back and listen to my Richmond podcast and my Bristol Dirt Race podcast because I have no clue where to rate this race. I literally had no clue. I listened to both and I was like, well, I was frustrated with Bristol. I was really frustrated with Richmond, but there was excitement there. And my thing with this race was there wasn't really a lot of excitement, but there also wasn't anything for me to complain about, nothing for me to be inherently upset about, I would say. Here's what I will say about this race. I like this race a lot less than the ones we had at Darlington last year. This race was pretty average and pretty tame, and yes, that can be a good refreshing change as we've seen just a bunch of chaos these past few weeks, but also just like, it really just didn't interest me a lot. And because of that, though I appreciated the racing, I have to give the Goodyear 400 a rating of 61%. I know this rating might be controversial because this race gave fans a lot to think about and a lot to process, but let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are on this race. And with that, I am done. Thank you all so much for listening to Above the Yellow Line, the show where we talk about all the updates, theories, news, recaps, and more of the NASCAR Cup Series. Next weekend, we are going to the Monster Mile Dover with literally, I think, the best trophy in the NASCAR history, I would say. I know we had jukeboxes, and that's pretty cool. I just like the monster holding the car at the end. I just think that's awesome. So we are going to Dover next week. Tune in later this week, Saturday morning, for a pre-race show for the Dryden 400 at the Monster Mile. We'll also talk some updates there. But in the meantime, follow my Twitter account for some daily updates in the world of NASCAR. Also for lap-by-lap coverage on race weekend. Also check out the Podium Finish, an awesome group of people to work with. I love working with that whole team. We do driver interviews, pre-race, post-race. Everything is great there, so make sure you support them and check them out. For now, thank you so much for supporting my channel, and until next time, I'll see ya.